Don't stop me now. Don't stop me now. Don't stop me now. Don't stop me now. I don't know how. Don't stop me now. I'm flying. I'm flying. I'm flying to the dawn. I'm flying. I'm flying like a diamond in the sky. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. I'll tell you what, talking to all my guests makes me feel like a little star. You're listening to IDK with Caroline Yost. IDK. IDK, what that stands for? Well, I don't care who the hell you are and why you think you could talk to me like that and ask me questions. Just kidding. JK, which means just kidding. I actually love when people ask questions and wonder about things in a way that is like, not like, oh, I don't know, I'm so scared, I feel sick, I don't know. But more like, I don't know. Isn't that awesome? I don't really know, but I don't know, but like maybe, wouldn't that be cool? And that is how we're all little stars. Because I don't really know what being a star would be like. A solar star. Or really any kind of star. But I'm certainly a star in my daily life. And that's why you're tuning in. And now, here's my conversation with another beautiful star. Lucyana Randall.
She sit in solemn silence on a dull, dark dock in a pestilential prison with a lifelong lock, awaiting the sensation of a short, sharp shock from a cheap and cheap chopper.
Cheap chopper and comp to.
Wait, no. I do this in the car. I don't listen to music. I'll for hours just do tongue twisters. To sit in solemn silence on a dull, dark dock in a pestilential prison with a lifelong lock, awaiting the sensation of a short, sharp shock from a cheap and chippy chopper on a big black block.
Oh my gosh.
And I'll
you wrote that?
No. It's like an old diction.
From theater.
It's like a diction thing.
Addiction.
Right. I'm addicted to diction.
I really need diction in my life. Although recently, and sometimes I've thought that that's maybe something that's holding me back in my acting career, is that half the time I watch back takes of things and I can't understand a word that I say. And then I'm like, oh, and then I actually saw a commercial recently where I couldn't understand a word that the actress was saying. And I was like, actually, no, I'm fine.
Yeah, I take it pretty seriously, and I think I'm pretty tough on myself about it. When I listen back to sets I've done, right, where when I get excited about an idea or when I'm kind of getting distracted or zoning out and talking too fast or kind of spinning my wheels, my words I'll stumble on them, or they will sort of blend together or have a weird rhythm. But I think that rhythm and diction are two things that I take pretty seriously. I fucking love talking clearly. That's beautiful. It's a good feeling, using my voice clearly.
No, and I love that about you. So here, let me do my thing. This is the IDK with Caroline Yost pod. Welcome all and one. I have my friend Lucyana Randall, who's such a funny comedian and an incredible writer. If you haven't already recognized, her ideas just flow from her with such precision and such vivacity that it's just it's delight to one's ears. And all the ways in which I wish that I could be a more elucidative speaker, she embodies.
No, that's really
I made up some of the words in that.
No, you didn't. I kind of
elucidative.
I think you might gorgeous. Be you were thinking of elucidated, I elucidate. Elucidate. Well. I think lucid would just. I mean, maybe I'm biased because it just sounds nice, lucid Lucyana. But
Lucyana, she's lucid.
Yeah, exactly. Lucid dreaming.
Lucid dreaming.
Did I ever tell you about that lucid dream I had where it was kind of fucked up, where I had a lucid dream. I was diagnosed with brain cancer, and I remember making the decision of I think I'm in a dream right now. I'm going to refuse treatment.
Wow.
And I only still remember really that decision, and I remember that it hurt. I remember
it hurt to have the cancer.
And it was generated by my brain. It can't possibly like compared, like it was a totally synthesized experience,
right,
from someone who, to be perfectly frank, hasn't experienced a great deal of physical pain in their life.
Yeah. But it did hurt in the dream. But you didn't physically feel pain.
No, I think I remember feeling pain in the dream.
Did you get to watch, like, your life, like, your body and, like, your physical form just deteriorate and, like, live out, like, the end of your days? Like, your body being ravaged by the cancer? Or...
That's a good question. I think the dream I had, that dream was, like, long ago enough and I've thought enough about it that the actual dream itself is probably lost. And,
right.
Like,
you're just
like,
in
I've
the memory space
to
now.
a point of, like... It is like, I mean, I'm a little embarrassed. I'm like, I pulled out like a concise little thing that I've definitely said that before, like told that anecdote before because I think it's interesting. But
right.
The actual dream probably like, they're just impressions.
Right. So this is interesting. So I'm going to talk about the thesis or what the idea of this podcast for anyone who hasn't listened before is that we have... I have some kind of honest conversation with someone I want to talk about. It's funny because we're funny, but we try not to do pre-planned bits. We try not to say anything we've said before. Lucyana, I know you're someone who has a dictionary of your jokes in your mind.
I know, it's bad.
So you need to resist what is just such an easy act for you. But also, if you do it, no one's going to know, and I'm not going to tell anyone, and I'm going to forgive you instantly.
It was the biggest thing I was worried about on the way here.
Because you were like, wow, she's talking about, like...
No, I just, like, just for myself, like, it's not something I like that I do in conversations, that I have, like, certain, like, lines of thinking or, like, theories or beliefs or, observations that I pull out again and again in conversation, which I think everybody does.
Yes.
And that's a part of why it's like when people are like, stand up, I don't know how you do it. Like, stand up seems so hard. I'm like, it's just about like, do you have an anecdote you've told enough times that you tell it really well? Like at a party?
Right.
Like something like you have laugh lines with and like, it's just a good story to tell. That's just like all it is. But I think that I take that too far sometimes. For me, or like I have an embarrassment about it. The fact that I'm like, I find myself talking about Penn and Teller constantly and like repeating the same things.
Right.
Just to give an example. Or like,
yeah.
But on my way here, I was like, well, I think like Caroline knows most of those things that I think. And so, I mean, we lived together. We've been like really close friends for a long time.
We've been our lives have been deeply entwined.
Deeply.
Yes, I directed. Lucyana is an incredible one-woman... An hour of stand-up. It's not an hour. I was going to say
an hour and 20 minutes.
It's an hour and 20 minutes. It's 90 minutes.
Which is standard for the theater.
It's a feature film.
Yes. Not even a long one. It's like a rom-com.
Yeah. That makes me thinking, like, maybe there should be an intermission. Is that crazy?
I hate intermissions.
Okay,
I hate picking the energy back up.
Right. Yeah. It's not ideal for comedy. This podcast is about... So we know a lot about each other. And the idea of this podcast is we're kind of exploring the idea of not knowing. So, and that doesn't mean that it's like something where... just if you have an idea about something or you're curious about something and you're like, I'm not sure, like kind of like what you're talking about of those anecdotes, it's like the first time you tell it or something. You know what I mean? Like you have this thought or this memory and you're kind of like, oh, I'm interested in exploring this. I think that's like part of it is like, this is a podcast where people can talk about stuff that's in that stage of like, oh, I'm just kind of curious about something. It's so funny because I'm like constantly changing the way that I say what the podcast is about, but I'm discovering it's evolving. And I'm going to allow it to evolve and it's going to be beautiful.
Yeah. You're going to move from the sea to the land and then like a whale back again.
And just cycle like that and be suspended in time.
Ooh.
On a beautiful beach in a big whale body. Sending vibrations. Ooh, vibes.
Marry, fuck, kill, orca, like killer whale, blue whale, or beluga. Marry, fuck, kill.
Marry, fuck, kill. Kill the orca.
Okay.
Because the orca is a killer.
You don't believe it can be rehabilitated?
I just don't think it can be trusted. And I fear that the amount of time it would take to rehabilitate it would get me first. and I might want to hug it too much or be too kissy with it, and I wouldn't like that. But ultimately, I don't know if my life is more valuable than an orca's life. But it's an incredible gift to be a human being because we can play games like this. And beluga or blue, I don't know the differences. Baby beluga.
Belugas are like, they're kind of grayer and like, I feel like they have like, they're smaller and like kind of plumper. They have more of a curve to them. Whereas I think
curvy.
The blue whale is like, you know, so large that it by necessity is like a giant sort of forward moving mass. Like I feel like
I'll marry the blue whale.
Yeah, the blue whale's a solid, that's kind of where I'm at. The blue whale's a solid, you know, and the beautiful song. No, maybe that's humpbacks.
I was thinking humpbacks I would fuck. But because they're kind of horny, like I think they have like a lot of barnacles on them, or they're ugly. But but then you described the beluga as curvy, and I thought I'd also like to fuck that.
There's something kind of sexy about it. The beluga is honestly, my answer is that, and this is like makes me sound callous or fucked up. I would kill the beluga because I think that's how you get caviar. You're
interested in mining the resources of a beluga.
That's fucked up. I freely admit. But it's just in the hypothetical, like I need money right now. I'm like kind of, you know, perpetually broke. Yeah. And when I think about like how expensive caviar is.
But the only and you love caviar so much you have to have it.
I've had it like twice. No, I think it'd be to sell. I would sell it on, you know, find someone to sell it to.
I see. Enterprise.
Yeah.
She's an imperialist.
If I had to do it by myself, like harvest the caviar myself, I couldn't do it.
You would spoil all the eggs.
Do you think I could really take a knife and slice into flesh? Absolutely not. Yeah. But maybe I'd like it.
You might like it, but it would be so devastating when all the baby eggs just like rot because you didn't act on like the proper timeline, and then you're like, wow, I've wasted so much life.
Yeah. Like I don't have like a chest of ice handy. Like, no. I mean,
you need an expert to help you kill the beluga.
In a hypothetical, say I have an associate, I have someone who sort of knows their way around the guts of a beluga. Yeah, I would probably kill a beluga and then fuck, I feel like in a world where I won't get hurt, I fuck the orca. The orcas have seen shit. Like, I feel like they are more dolphin-like, and I know dolphins like...
The orca would definitely be the kind of animal that you'd have sex with where you're like, I don't want to, but I need you. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, you're bad for me, but like,
oh my God,
fuck me, daddy.
I can fix him.
You know what I mean? I can fix him. Like, the orca would be like that, and it would be like, it's like some kind of psychological torture fetish.
Yeah, so yeah, and that's where I'm at.
And she's gonna fuck like that.
Yeah, I'm just kind of like troubled. But and then yeah, that's my answer. Kill the beluga, but in an alternative timeline, kill the orca, fuck the beluga, because you can kind of like, that's like a slippery,
right.
You can slide up and down.
The blue whale would keep us safe.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I feel like Jonah and the whale, like blue whale, like swallowed him, and he lived forever in the stomach of the... He had coffee down there? No, I don't know. I think in my mind, that's another dream I had. I had a dream that me and my sister had like high tea in the belly of like a big dead whale.
Yeah.
This was many years ago, but made, again, a strong
Were you wearing outfits? Like fancy dress?
If I answered either way, I would be making something up because I have the image in my mind, but when I think about it, I'm like...
It's hard to pin it down.
What lasted the next morning was not the small details, but the scenario itself, I think.
That's how dreams are. They're like, once you try to focus in on any aspect,
it's one
like,
image.
It goes
like,
away.
Yeah, it's like a very thin image, but very strong. I think because my sister and I have had some fancy high tea at a place called Eloise's. Not Eloise's, Alice's Teacup.
Oh.
It's like a tea party restaurant. No, on like the Upper East Side. I think there's one on the Upper West, but it's like a tea party restaurant for like rich little girls and their nannies. Oh my God. It's like, we should go there. You would love it there. Where you get like, they call it the Mad Hatter, and it's like a 3-tiered tray of like finger sandwiches and little cakes and like bonbons. On a sandwich. And you have like, you're getting a pot of tea and you have your little like china cup, and it's all Alice in Wonderland themed.
Okay.
It's very cute.
Kitty cute.
But we go there. That's like what we do together when she comes to visit. And then when I was a kid, my dad took us to see this dead beach blue whale in our town. And
you saw a whale with your eyes?
Yeah, a dead one, like a rotting dead whale. And for years I was like, that has to be an implanted memory. Like I think I don't trust my own memory all the time.
Yeah.
Or for years I was like, that's like too fantastical a thing to have really happened.
Right.
So I think I was really little when it happened. And then I did some digging and I found it in the Newport Daily News, like archives online. I was like, high and like really in a deep Google situation.
Right.
And I looked it up, and there was like a news item about this whale. Like it was real. And I asked my dad, and he was like, yeah, we saw that. I took you to see it.
Wow.
Like it's like a thing we did on a Saturday.
Yes.
It was like on a rocky beach. I don't remember which one it was.
What if some of your dreams
That's what I'm saying.
are things that have actually happened to you?
That's what I'm saying, is that this dream is like, but I get it mixed up. There's so much Jonah and the whale symbolism there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always interesting. I never have like really thought that like, I mean, I haven't really engaged that deeply with dream analysis, but it's like, I feel like often when I have some type of anxiety dream or something, I'm like aware of the memories or the things that I'm like putting together in a way where I'm like, I don't really see how like some type of analysis of the imagery in this is like gonna add that much more for me or something.
I love
but you
dreams.
Like it.
Oh, I love dreams. Well, I've been recently like, I've like found some like names for, like, I feel like I slip into that like half dream state really easily. Right. And I Googled it randomly. And it's
like when you're awake and you're
sleeping. When you're falling asleep and sort of like beautiful images or like sentences or sounds sort of like spring unbidden to you.
Yes.
And I'm like, I talk a lot in my sleep or like in my like half sleep, but I enter that half sleep state really easily. And upon waking as well, like I feel like I like am able to sort of stay in it. I find it very pleasurable to stay in it, where I've like, feel like I've like written whole sentences. So it comes when you wake up.
Yes.
And I have like, I keep paper all around, so I feel like I write down a lot of it, but
I have had ideas in that kind of state as well.
Or like when you're falling asleep on the couch and you're watching a movie, or in that hypnagogic state. So that's what it is. And I think I've become really fascinated by it because it is something that comes easily to me, and that like, I think it's just there's no inhibition about what you're saying or whatever. So it's just sort of like free associative, like just like strange things falling out of your mouth. Like, I think it gives you like a practice in like being able to just like close your eyes and spit out images, because I feel like that's what appears to me the most, is like images and sentences. Mm-hmm. And so I think I've started to pay more attention, or like be more conscious and aware, or like try to maintain like a small, because it's like the ego of your imagination sort of like falls asleep, but your id stays awake a little longer, I feel like.
Right.
And so that's like a playtime, and that's always like a free associative play state I really like. Yeah. That I feel like is the same as like I talk about going turbo mode or whatever with the Red Bull and the hitting just enough of the spliff or whatever.
Like you're trying to concoct that type of like alternate space, but like in your waking life.
Puzzle world. That's always when I think puzzle world and like ladder world. But it's like a messages from puzzle world, and I think it's like it's something that I am able to tap into slightly like in a waking state. Yeah, I think that like it's something I do sort of as a game, is I'll like close my eyes and just try to like formulate an image and spit it out right away. Yes. Yeah, like a sheepdog racing through a paddock, gray sky above, stallions gallop by, whatever.
Okay, I'm interested in experiencing this.
Do it, try it. Just like one image and just go.
My microphone.
Your tape didn't hold.
I didn't even like, I'm like, it's just floating on the surface of that tape. Okay. Cherry soda on a table in a diner, and a guy with a bow tie shaking the hand of a pastor.
Beautiful. Isn't that fun?
Yeah, it kind of felt like I was like I couldn't tell if the image or the word was leading, or like the sentence was leading, because like once you start, you kind of like, it falls from there. It follows.
And I feel like it's something that some people might qualify as a sort of like improvisational thing, but it really doesn't feel like it. For me, it's like, I feel like this is something that I've always been able to do, is I can kind of like pluck an image out of the like pool, and just like, that's like a description of something that already exists. Like, I don't feel like when I have that image in my head, I'm not like, or like when I say like the thing about the sheepdog or whatever, or describe it, I don't think I'm like making up what's happening as it's happening. I think I'm just like looking at the picture. I'm a very, like, I think for someone so verbal, I am surprisingly image-based. But I think I have a very responsive vocabulary. And I think, like, when I find these images, I think it's, like, something that comes through a lot in, like, my fiction writing. And my poetry is always harder for me, though. Yes. Because it's about, like, whittling down the words you're using to convey that image and, like, the sensation of it. Yeah. And I feel like the concision of poetry makes it more evocative. What was I reading about? Oh, in ekphrastic work. I'm getting so
ekphrastic.
I'm getting so Dr. Lucyana right now. I'm sorry.
What is ekphrastic? Tell me the definition.
So ekphrasis is and I'm gonna butcher like the definition because I don't have like a totally thorough understanding.
I don't know, and I don't care.
Know. Yeah, I don't really know. But
ekphrastic, look it up if you're not satisfied.
It's great. It's like a Greek word. It's ekphrastic, ekphrastic. Yeah, and it's like a sort of literary style of really closely describing anything, like artwork specifically. Like there's this Wismas, I think I'm pronouncing that right, I don't know. Ding ding. But he wrote Against Nature, which is like has like these whole long passages that are just like in exhaustive detail describing like this one painting, like really cool stuff. And really like exhaustive in detail. But then I read something, it honestly might have been like a quote tweet, but about how, or like, you know,
there's
someone
so
tweeted
many
like,
ideas on
someone
that site.
tweeted like a page of like some, I don't know. I don't
Someone
have, like,
had written something and it was put on in an image on the tweet.
I don't have a close relationship with any sort of theory, but I definitely have a lot of like little things I've learned that I've like drawn dubious connections.
And you don't need to know shit about theory to talk about theory on this show.
Or there's like a book that same way.
It's amazing. It's incredibly distracting.
No. It's kind of nice. It's giving me like a focus point.
I'm fooling with this
She's
microphone.
fiddling with her mic.
To such an extent that like I'm ruining the audio. Should I hold it like this the whole time?
Honestly, it's kind of cute and little.
Cute. Okay, I'll do this for now. And then I might just give up on
you've got that tape in your hair.
It's not serving me. Be gone.
Anyways, this thing about, before I forget, this thing about ekphrasis is, or like, that it's actually the most effective when you use the most generic detail possible because it has the like reader, it like almost paradoxically conjures something more thoroughly for the reader if you're not using like a lot of adjectives. Specific. Well, because you're not editorial. If
it's distracting.
Not editorializing, simply describing.
Yeah, so you'd be like brown dog instead of sable dog or something like that.
Or you might, you know, instead of saying like gleaming sable dog or like, you know, some sort of like...
You would say gleaming sable dog?
No, instead of saying that, just saying like the breed of dog it is. Because like the person can conjure it in their mind and then it makes it like more real.
And is the idea sort of like, it's like photorealism in painting but with language? Like you're trying to...
Kind of, yeah.
Conjure like a single image in someone's mind, like with the detail of like as if they're there.
Yeah, and I think that's like...
But just visual information in the language, not like other senses.
Well, I think that there's like... It's not just of what the picture is, but like with a painting, for example, you might be describing like the shadow of the frame or the like surrounding environment or like the texture of the brush itself. Like it's about the work as both an object and like an image.
I see.
So yeah, I guess it's kind of like
a photorealism. So you do it ekphrastic, you do it about paintings?
Or it could be. Or about like sort of like describing any sort of like work in that way.
That's interesting, and it also seems like something that would be like good for like accessibility. Like, you know, in Instagram, like often people write descriptions of like...
those, and they add more context. They're interesting.
Yeah, or like someone describes what the image is for someone who's visually impaired.
Well, that's an interesting thing about Instagram is that we're much more obsessed with like image and like narrativizing images of ourselves especially, and like you can't really help it.
You could do a series where you do an image and then in the next one you do like a text of ekphrastic description.
I don't know if I'm quite there yet because I'm trying to like move away from the more like self-reflexive or like self-describing and more towards the like what can I produce out of thin air, which I think is something that I'm so interested in like a person's ability to like focus their attention on something internal and like bring it out in response to the world. Mm-hmm. I don't really know what that means actually. It just fell out of my mouth, which I think is a big reason I love talking so much is because I feel like I articulate things that I probably articulated somewhere in my hypnagogic state before, and like that's like you were saying, it's something that I am proud of is that I can communicate ideas very clearly on the fly.
Yes.
I'm never quite sure if I'm making sense though. The dream is lucid communication, as you know.
Well, that's the problem with communication is that like even if you think you're expressing yourself clearly, like everyone has different interpretations of different words and different words bring different images to mind, and so it's like you could be actually a really effective communicator, but like just that's something I find even with like written text. It's like I feel like traditionally people think of like writing as like the way where it's like I can get my ideas out the clearest, but then it's like But actually, the person who's going to read it is going to have their own interpretation of what you've written. And so maybe communication is actually like more in depth in a way where it's like responsive. Yeah. And maybe that means like, rather than this like, I just feel like I have this respect for the written form in a way that has like sometimes ended up tripping me up, because like ultimately I tend to be better in collaboration or like in speech or I don't know, like I have a hard time to just sit down and write a lot of the time, which is part of why coming up with the idea to do this show was like so genius to me, because I was like, oh, I have all these ideas about like my life and stuff that I think are interesting, and I'd love to like
to say then.
Have the opportunity to talk about them, and like writing them down just seems like I'm like I wouldn't even know how to begin, and this is like a way where I'm like I know all these interesting people and I want to hear from them, and I know that I've had the capacity to have conversations like this with people. And so, yeah, I think that it's like, it can free you up to not... What the hell did I respond to with that?
You don't even have to worry about it. I don't know.
I don't know.
What I will say is that it's funny that you're like, I wanted to give myself a platform to have these conversations because, and you know this is a quality I have, I feel like it's like my disease that I can't like not like really get into it with someone like in the way we're doing, but not in a setting that is like right for that. Like this is the setting that is right for like this kind of like conversation where I'm like talking about these like literary forms and like, you know, we're having like making deep connections and talking about the unconscious. And
our intention is to like focus on each other a lot and like be really present in the conversation. Yeah.
But I'm just like, and I know you've observed this in the course of our friendship. I'm like at a house party or something, like an environment that is for small talk. Hey, how are you? And like,
and your like energy's all like, whoa, there's all these people around. Not your energy, but I'm saying in general.
I wind up like hyper focusing on a conversation with somebody and like really like I have like really intense, deep conversations with a lot of people. Yeah. But I always am like, this is not the context. Yeah. Like it's something that I find embarrassing. That's like why I have all those like extensive notes about like, I feel like there was a period of time where I was like, it is socially strange to be doing this like in this environment, and you need to like keep your trap shut. And I would go home and I would write down like in a notebook like all the shit I had like really wanted to talk to someone about, or all the observations I had like wished I'd made to somebody. Yeah. And so I have like, it's not, I don't think of it as diaries, but it is like I have extensive notes on so many open mics I've been to. Yeah. It's interesting. That's so funny. It's interesting because I'm like, I don't actually think of a party as like necessarily the wrong context for that to happen in. Because I'm like, oh, I might enjoy talking to someone on that level, especially if it's like, but the hard part is like, it's like, oh, knowing how getting a sense of how the other person is responding and if they want to be in that. Because I'm like, for us, it's like, oh, right, I'm like, I would love to talk to you like that for the most part at any party I'm at. But like, we kind of have an understanding that like we like to talk like this to each other. Yeah, I think I wind up talking like that to a lot of people I don't ordinarily talk to. Right, because that's what happens at a party. Yeah, at a party, like I think I'm just very curious. Like there's so many people I feel like that we're surrounded by a wide social circle by performing and like sort of like creatively working in the sorts of environments that we do. Like you meet so many people. Totally. And I do feel like I'm someone who's very aware of and conscious of my attention, and like I really do have like I pay pretty close attention to things, or am constantly checking to make sure I'm paying attention to something, which is like makes you like I check in a lot, like especially when I'm talking to people at a party or watching an open mic or whatever, and I feel like I have a lot to say about everything. Yeah, and you so do. I do, and I'm really curious. I'm very curious about people. Yeah. I'm really like your experience is so like immediately linked to like your thinking and like I sometimes feel a little selfish, like I'm like mining people for like fodder to like further, you know, whatever programs I'm running in the background. Yeah. Although I really shouldn't talk about my, you know, this. I make so many comparisons of my brain with a computer, and it's just like I have no idea how a computer works. Yeah, it's amazing. Do you feel like, do you enjoy like the mining? Like it doesn't feel like it's like, oh, it's like this terrible compulsion that like I have to do this. It feels like that afterwards, but in the moment it's like deeply pleasurable. I love talking like this. I love having long conversations and I love talking to people, but I think I have like a weird inverted anxiety socially and a weird inverted stage fright where like a lot of people are really nervous, for example, before they go on stage or before they arrive somewhere. Right. As long as I don't go first, I'm so excited to go on stage. I'm like, if I'm not second in the lineup, I'm like, when's it my turn?
Right.
And like, I'll be watching a show I'm not on and I'm like, put me in, like, when I really want to go up there. But it's the aftermath of like, it's almost like a hangover of like, for the next like day and a half, like really obsessively replaying and like being like, you didn't make your point clear there. Like you didn't, I'm like kind of a ruthless editor of myself.
Right.
In a way that I think produces good work. I mean, I'm a ruthless editor. I'm like really,
totally.
I do a lot of deep thinking, but
I
do it also on like,
torturous.
just like I'm an editor of my thinking in a way, which is why I was like, oh, I don't trust that I'm like retelling this dream correctly.
Right.
So I feel like I've like, in my head, like refined it to a point where it is the most pleasing to the ear and the most like applicable and like,
right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's interesting because I feel like some people are really good at doing that and like those are the best storytellers and stuff like that. Yeah. And I am just so not good at that. Or like telling stories or anything. And part of it is just like I've cultivated different things in my performance and my way of being, and that's like fine, but it's a delightful thing that we do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Although sometimes it's like when you're friends with someone who does that a lot, sometimes you're like, okay, you're changing this story.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like with like my friend Eddie, like my best friend Eddie, we live together and we spend a lot of time together, and truly, and we've been friends for a long time. He has heard me talk about everything, and it's like, I'll be like, we'll be out somewhere, and again, I compulsively do this of like, I'll bring up some like, you know, refined version of something that like we've talked about, or like that I've condensed into like sound bites and opinions of like an opinion I can easily give. I articulate my opinions a lot and then I keep them in the arsenal.
Right. It's just
and I always want to like acknowledge it. And well, I think you know, my hero is Joan Rivers.
Yes, and she did the cards.
And she had like the card catalogs, and I don't have the organizational capacity and like or the follow through to actually do that. Where like I write everything down on index cards and it's like filed and alphabetized. But
she didn't have a computer though. I bet.
Yeah, I do. Well,
she didn't know anything about
either.
Computers.
Well, you know, I have my crazy. I do write a lot of stuff down. I have my crazy.
But you do it in your head.
But I don't have it. It's much more all over the place and messy. I do have it in my head. Yeah, I do feel like I have that Dewey Decimal System. Like, and I feel like I can find a way to insert something into any conversation.
Okay, here's an experiment.
Okay, let's do it.
I'll give you a topic, and you'll say if you have things that you have written or
let's do it. I love that.
Water.
Yeah, I have stuff about water. I feel like I have like I can make small talk about water for a while.
Okay.
About hydration, about I constantly have a dry mouth, and so I feel like I drink water pretty compulsively, and I exclusively want to drink it out of like a container that I have to use both hands for. Like I don't really feel like I'm hydrating unless I have like a big tankard of water that I'm like deeply drinking from.
Yeah.
Like a Viking or something.
Wow. Next idea on water.
Next
card on water.
I fucking hate the beach. I can't do it.
I know.
I hate the beach because you have to have all your stuff with you, and you have to like brought all your stuff, and like water, like that's all the water you have for the day. And you're like out there in the sun, like it's exhausting. You're sweating, and there's sand everywhere.
Yeah, it's in your stuff. Next idea on water, and then we'll stop this. What about, don't you have something
water's
about
like so scary? We have like, the ocean, like we have more on it. We know less about the ocean than we know about space, which like fucks me up pretty bad. Especially like I'm from an island, like I grew up really surrounded by water, like the beach whale and everything. And I think some of my worst dreams have taken place like on the deep ocean floor.
Yeah.
Like when I grew up, you had to like, like of crashing into the water. That's the scariest. Like cannonballing from like a great height into the water is like, I feel like those like, that's like a really big archetype, or not archetype, but trope, is like the kid standing at the top of the diving board, like unable to dive.
Right.
That's like my biggest fear, is like being in that situation of being like, you have to submit to the vastness of the water or climb back down. And there's like, this is the decision point, and like the worst thing you can do is like freeze up.
Right. See, in that scenario, for me, the thing that I'm terrified of is the fall. Like, not the vastness of the water, but like being at a high height and being like, I'm going to surrender to falling. But that's okay. It's just difference of people.
Yeah. I think you and I have a lot of like complementary differences.
Yes, we do have a lot of complementary differences. Yeah, I guess I'm like, oh, something I was thinking about doing at the beginning, but we've arrived here now, so I'll bring it up. But I'm like, I feel like part of the reason, or the reason why I asked you to be a guest, beyond just all the other amazing conversation we've had so far, is like the sparkling conversation. How vivid and lovely.
Yes. Ooh, I like her.
How vivid and lovely. Yes, we love it.
That's like a dame.
Words and verbs.
You know I love a dame.
You know I love a dame. Pass me a cigarette. I'm not smoking anymore.
I'm proud of you.
Yeah, I had this cough.
Oh yeah, you told me about that.
Oh, it's going away, but so I wanted to bring you on the podcast because, one, I feel like we're friends who have like almost in some way it feels like we've like had experiences of like life and death together. Like we've just like had such real life happen between us, about being friends and living together for a long time in like deeply transitional times in our lives, and then also like working on your show, like
we've excavated
so much about like your story, and like I've been so much a part of it, and it just like almost felt like when like the opportunity came up to work on your show, it like felt like something where I was like, oh, it's like important that I do this or something, and not just for you, like for me too, you know. And I remember like having this moment of sitting at your kitchen table while we were working on your show, and I think I had like, maybe this was afterwards when we were like catching up about it, but I had like just come off this trip of like being in LA and like feeling, I just was, like, had like a few like ecstatic months after just like feeling miserable for 6 months. And I remember saying to you at the time, I was like, I kind of feel like I'm like becoming spiritual, or I said something, or like on a spiritual journey, and you were like, what do you mean by that?
I asked you, which is the same thing I asked you before we started. Yes. I was like, can you define
like what spiritual journey is? And I think at the time I didn't really know, or I didn't have as much clarity on it, and I was just like, oh, I don't know. I just had this sense that I was on the cusp of something, and I was feeling really good, and like I think the thing that I have experienced is that like I didn't believe in God, and now I believe in God. And it's not really God in the way that's like the Father.
Yeah.
But this like idea of like something greater and unknown that like connects us all, that we're like all a part of, that like exists between us and between all of our experience, and like informs everything that happens in our lives, and like that is something that like has just like emerged for me. And it's like, where do you talk about this stuff if you're like, I feel like talking with friends is like the way to do it.
And also it's just like one of the great pleasures of life. Like, do you know how many people have sat at that? Like, that's what I love about this apartment, is like I really do just the way I want to be with people, or really communicate and connect with people, is like, I think you told me this once. I like it was in tears forcing you to tell me what people didn't like about me. I was like, I think about it all the time. I like,
that's so great, because I probably said real shit.
No, you did, because I was really not doing so. I was like having like a bit of a temper tantrum about something. I don't even really remember what, but I like was having like a spiral of anxiety about like how I'm perceived, like da da da.
Yeah.
I think it was like really in a period. It was like during a period of COVID where we were all like really by ourselves a lot, and like that was like a really powerful, beautiful experience for me. But it also like once people started seeing each other again and being around each other again, I began to like really try to reconcile like who I'd been before with who I was now, whatever. But you are a close friend and very trusted confidant, and I was like, I really can't stand being lied to or having the truth evaded. And I know that everyone talks merciless shit about each other. Yeah. And I know that shit gets talked about me, and that's fine if I know what it is, because I have such a wild imagination that like, and I'm so connected to my imagination that it's out of control. It's absolutely out of control. Where like, if I know what people don't like about me, that's fine. If I can like articulate it and like be like, that's the behavior you should correct. So
because whatever you think in your head is going to be worse. Yeah.
Yes. I made you swear to me that like, just tell me something that like, I knew at some point I had come up in conversation, someone had been like, I don't like this about her. Mm-hmm. I wanted to know at least one thing. See, now we're really truly doing something that like, this is something I haven't ever talked or articulated to anybody or talked about, is that I think because it's I'm embarrassed at the way I was acting at the time, and like how like, you know, hysteria is like a mode I can enter, and like it is self-perpetuating and just has to run its course. Yeah.
And you can just like hold so much inside of you.
Yeah. And then like once it spills, it really spills.
And like the imagination, it can go like up or it can go like down.
Yeah, it's very erratic and it's very fast. Yeah. Like if the thoughts start racing enough, it can really, there's a pressure of speech of like, I can't stop talking. Yeah. And you told me, you're like, sometimes you can be a little overwhelming in group situations. Like, you know, and this is something what I took from it was a positive thing, was that I was like, yes, I desire to really like communicate with people one-on-one. And it's something that I'm like very aware of. And I think is part of why I like sometimes feel like I need to be more aware of context when I'm really like getting deep into something.
Right. Because you're kind of like losing sight of everything else.
But that was something where I was like, that was kind of a boon to grant me as a friend, was like, I think someone once told me, it was like, someone was like, please just tell me shit to my face. Like if you say it to me, I genuinely am happy to know, even if, like, it doesn't hurt my feelings if I know you're being honest. Yeah. And in a like way that is not couching something. Like, yes. I would like to know what people think, because what I imagine is worse. And he was like, you are the first person you would be the first person to say that and actually mean it if this was true.
That like what you think of is worse than what people say.
No, that I want, like, tell me to my face. I see. And he's like, people say that and they don't actually want that to happen. And I was like, it is like a favor I ask. Of like communication is so important to me, and like I really don't like having to wonder or wonder if my interpretation is correct. Like, I want to understand. I'm like a know-it-all. I want to know exactly what's happening, and that way I can respond to the situation. And like, but was something I think about a lot, of like, I developed myself and like my awareness of myself the best in conversation, which I think I was like really excited to come on this podcast. And why I was excited to do it with you, because I feel like we have participated in and borne witness to so many of each other's like transformative life events over the past like 6 years we've been friends.
Because remember we did mushrooms and we just both first you cried and then I cried for a long time.
That was an amazing day. And then I got strep throat like 2 days later and was like wandering the house with like 104-degree fever, like by myself, like through, you know, the labyrinth of the mind. Yeah. Which is, I think, a good aftermath to have.
Totally.
However agonizing it was at the time.
Wait, what were you saying though? Because I interrupted you.
Just that like at a lot of, we've been very intimate with each other at like living together at like you were saying, transitional periods in our lives. And then like just really closely watching each other or paying attention to each other, which is, attention is like, again, my obsession. But I feel like you are also an endlessly fascinating person to me, and like incredibly compelling, and like participating in your life has always been like such a great part of it. Yes. Because I feel like we do have very different approaches.
We're different. Yeah.
We are different.
Yeah.
But I feel like each other. I feel like I've opened myself more to the possibility that the thing I generate out of thin air is to be trusted from you, because I think that like I don't really agonize as much as I once did about starting or like having an idea. I think I used to check an idea for mistakes before I was finished having it. Right. And I think I'm much more trusting of my immediate perception or my immediate seed of something. And I still do have that quality of like being an editor and like changing things and like finding the best way to articulate that thing idea I had. But like the I don't know of it all, I think, is something that I'm much more comfortable with because I know you.
Yeah, because you know that I generate jokes by looking around the room and thinking of ideas about what's in my immediate environment.
But I think it's like the way I've translated that is like, well, I'm very internally focused in a way that I occasionally think is a deficit, and you're very externally focused. But I think I have like the room of myself. I'm much more like I'm looking around and like taking things, and I think that's like the free associative thing comes so easily to me, and I think it is like that, like looking around the like house of the mind and like finding things that are interesting.
That is so beautiful, because I think that like I feel like you seem to be in the
time of your life where like you've sort of like been thriving in a way that like you weren't always thriving when I knew you. And I'm like, I wonder, and part of it is that I feel like this thing from you where you're like reaching out more, like you're trying to identify people that you're interested in or things that you're interested in or people you want to talk to, and you're like reaching out and like kind of pursuing those things and like maybe getting more external, because I feel like you do have such an ability to like this house inside your mind, like you could keep building and like build like an entire world around yourself, like with the amount of like thought and ideas and like imaginative capacity that you have. And so I'm like, but then I see like this desire to like reach out in you in this like new way, and I'm like, I feel like that is probably something that is like grounding for you and like helps you feel connected and not like isolated by all of this.
It's been a very like conscious process of development over the past 6 months. Like I think we haven't really talked deeply like this since the end of the show. Yeah. And like that was like I mean, not to go too far into like the show and all this stuff, this like this monologue basically.
The long monologue.
The 90-minute monologue. Exquisite agitation.
At the Brick.
Agitation.
At the Brick. February 2022.
3 nights of total agony. 3 nights of
teetering
torture.
On the edge.
Yeah, 3 nights of like looking down the edge of the diving board, like and like trying to jackknife and belly flopping in the end. And then I mean, and I feel like we've already like run our 45 minutes, and I don't.
Absolutely, but we're almost there. Oh my god, it's 44:50.
This is like in therapy. I'm so aware of what
you
time
have
it
the
is.
sense. Well, let's talk about this and then we can wrap up.
Well, it's like no, this is a whole other podcast. But essentially, I've really returned to my family, and my family is just full of such interesting people. And this is what I mean when I say it's a whole other podcast, because it's something like this is like something I've been chewing on for about 6 months. Is like reorienting myself and my imagination and like what it can build, because my uncle Luke passed away in March after being sick for a while. And he was like a really incredible person. Anybody who's listening to this, if they want context for like me or my work, we're so lucky to have like this documentation of him as an artist. He's lukemrandall.com, LUKEMRANDALL.com. And I just really... I advise you to go through, and like it doesn't even give you a taste, but he was such a multidisciplinary, incredible artist and like a craftsperson. And my family is full of craftspeople, people who are so process oriented. And so like my father's a woodworker, my mother's a glass blower. And I'm really lucky, and my family is just very tight knit and part of like this like wider community of artists. Mm-hmm. And my uncle was like a poor. This is how I've like thought about it to myself, is he was like, he absorbed so much and he was turned outward to the world. Like, this is like why it's exciting that you're observing this independently of me, because this is something that like the aftermath of that show combined with this grieving process, which for me has sort of taken the form of like really thinking deeply about who this person, such an important person and such like a genius, an absolute genius, like unquestionably eccentric, strange, and totally himself. Like, what a body of work and what like a personal mythology he left behind. And like the fact that like you could go to this website and it wouldn't give you the total picture of him as a person, but you can at least glimpse or see what was so dazzling about him. And so just without even trying, he's like filling out that world, and like irradiated from him. And he apprenticed until the end of his life. He was always picking up new disciplines, and he was crazy. He was like totally crazy. And his hero is Napoleon Dynamite.
Wow.
And he taught himself, he was really fascinated with historical decorative arts, and he learned like rug hooking, like really, like it would take him a year to finish one. Yeah. He's gorgeous, like he was really interested in like early American arts and crafts era, like decorative art and decorative painting. And that was what he did as his day job. Was he restored and gilded and like was a plasterer and like made molded ceilings and like restored like historical decorative buildings. So and stuff. Cool. And I'm trying to back up to where I was. He was just like he really loved the egolessness of like decoration and adornment and process. And like, you know, this doesn't totally connect to the first thought or where I was, but like he was just so oriented in taking things in from the world and like finding so much joy in like how everything he took in changed and influenced him as an artist. And like this rug he did, oh yes, this is what I was talking about. He learned how to hook these rugs, you know, he learned how to tan leather, he did leather working, he did silversmithing, he tried to learn taxidermy and then got annoyed because he exclusively used roadkill, obviously, but because there's so much fake parts you had to use in taxidermy, he was like, that's bullshit. But he hooked this rug, it's like 6 feet long, about it's like a beautiful portrait of Napoleon Dynamite, and it has like his mantra. It says, do whatever you want to do, and do whatever you want to do is just like, I remember seeing him give a talk about it. It was just like Napoleon Dynamite to him was just like the character that like totally epitomized like what it was like to just live as like who you wanted to be, and just like whatever idea you had, that was what you did. And like that I think is something, a principle my family kind of abides by in many ways. Cool. Is like they're all kind of eccentric or strange, but I think everybody I was surrounded by when I grew up, both family and like, you know, family friends, were people who sort of did whatever they wanted. And I think that's the kind of people I attract in my life. I think you are one of those people. I think it's like a community I've built around myself that I try to draw people into more, because I think my family on that principle brings people into the fold very easily. And it's something I really like. His memorial, we did it Quaker style, which is like sort of in the round, where like the family, we were sitting on these in the Quaker Meeting House in Newport, where I grew up, Newport, Rhode Island, where I grew up, which is like this historical building. And then just like so many people came. He was like kind of a mythic figure in like Newport and Middletown, and the way these Quaker services work is no one leads it really. It's just people just stand up and speak as they're moved to. Right. And it was just this like, there were so many people. There was like such a long service, and like it was amazing. It was one of the most beautiful things ever. And that was just something that like he did whatever he wanted to do, and what he wanted to do in such a large part was like absorb, and he was so curious, and to like learn everything. And like to seek out people who were masters of things and like learn from them and synthesize it into what he was doing.
It sounds like your uncle was very in touch with his bloom.
What does that mean?
Now, the bloom is an idea that I've been working on.
Isn't it amazing to be someone like, we all do develop our own language for...
It's a theory of life.
It's a theory of life. Develop your language, like fill out your space, make your little area.
Yes. And the bloom is like this idea I had that about like a way of thinking about life, where like a more traditional way of thinking about life is very linear. Like you get a job so that you can make money, so that you can have a family, so that you can be respected, whatever. Lateral world. And that's sort of how the practical material world is structured, like in our society. That's how you make money and survive. The more you participate in that system, the more lucrative it'll be for you, or whatever.
Yeah.
And
on
then,
a material level,
potentially, at least it's the easiest way in. And then there's this other way of living that's called the bloom, and it's not linear, and it kind of encourages someone to like explore anything that occurs to them that like they think is interesting or that they're interested in. So like something like my painting or something. In the bloom, I don't have an attitude about my painting that's like, but that's not like serving my career as a comedian or something. It's more just like living in this way that it's like, if you are actively just following anything that you feel drawn to or curious by,
if it stimulates you, it's worthwhile.
It's worthwhile, and it will like develop you. And like you're talking about like your uncle like radiating and like take like a pour, like taking in and putting out, and it's also making me think of like maybe there's something about the bloom of like it's like by absorbing you're like able to expand more and more and more like the limits of your person, whereas like when you're living in this more linear way, that's like de-emphasized and not like centralized. And I think that that's like a shame, because it's like almost like bloom where you are planted or something like that. You know what I mean? It's like a structure that if like people live more like that, like
I think it's something you have to cultivate intuitively and not, I think it's like the flip side of that is the like artist's way self-help with like I'm going to try to structure how I orient myself towards that.
Right.
I think, going back to when you're talking about like this has been like these changes you've noticed have been a conscious, it has been, I think the form like that my grieving took and has taken is that in the months after, not that it feels kind of crass or gross to equate, like put these events together, but I had this like really big kind of dark night of the soul experience, like doing this show that ultimately I'm still not really very happy with. And that I do not feel really articulated my values or like what I wanted to communicate, partially because it was so focused on self-excavation and like looking inward and like really like articulating exactly what was inside and feeling so frustrated at not being able to draw the conclusions that I needed to draw in time. And I was so tapped out afterwards, like totally tapped out. And then I began, like, my uncle passed away and it was like, devastating for my family. Not to go too much into it, but just like such an incredible loss.
It was real loss.
Yeah, it's, and I think the form my grieving took was like figuring out like how to honor the fact that he left, like, to learn the lessons I can from the incredible body of work he left behind. Like the obsessive documentation of his life and the diaries and the like paper, like he generated so much material in his life that I felt that the best way to honor or to respond to and process this was to try to like distill what those principles he had were and like really look at the things that made me unhappy about the way I was working and like just like learn the lesson. Like there were lessons to be learned there. And so like I really
walk in his shoes.
I just like I would just pace around my house all day and I would like look at his work and like there's some really, that's why I wanted to say his website because there are some videos on there and I read some writings he did that are just like clarify so perfectly a lot of like basically, I felt like his values were values that advanced my own or that like incorporating his values and like trying to embody certain ideals or principles that he did was a way of keeping him with me. Yeah. And I mean, he's been like he was one of my idols my whole life of like, just like what a life of making and creating looks like. And I think I have it with my father as well. And the last thing I'll say.
Yeah. What a way to honor the men in your life.
Yeah. Well, my father and his brother were very close. Like they were each other's like soulmates. They were each other's people. And they were like two sides of the same coin of like this craftsperson, this idea of craft and of process and of like what it's like to dedicate your life, not towards like, towards the minutia and the execution of creation and not and like the final product being, my father's like a master woodworker, right? And he has a very interesting way with words. And so for me, the two parts of this ideal that has been the conscious shift has been Luke's do whatever you want to do. Yeah. And then this thing my dad said to me once, which sort of, he'll text me kind of strings of nonsense where he's not like, his texting is kind of funny. Yeah. He texts in sort of like a strange way, but he'll send me progress pictures of like projects he's working on. And he sent me something once, he's just like, it's every detail is so well tended to. And he sent me a picture of like a perfectly dovetailed joint. And he said, that's where the value added soul is. And value added soul to me is like a strange phrase, but like really speaks to, I think, the thing that makes the work they both do feel otherworldly and in some way, or like that thing I'm always talking about, like glimpsing a mystery in some way. Yes. Because the focus is so much on like making it with utmost care and expert. So for me, do whatever you want to do it well. That's where the value added soul is. Like those are the things to me that these two incredibly attentive and like brilliant people like the value that bound them together, and
it's
that
like
I feel
devotion.
like binds, like, and it feels like a different kind of word for spirituality, a different kind of like way of describing worship, or this thing you're talking about,
worship,
like God
devotion,
was so not
dedication.
figured. God and religion didn't figure into my upbringing at all. No one ever talked about it. I didn't care. I still don't really care. But I think that part of that is that what the things that animate families, which is a phrase I've said to you before, are all different, and like the way that you learn to find things that animate you are different. It could be football, whatever, like the things that like bind you and
that give you life,
the values and the principles you have. I think it is all ultimately like different ways of describing similar necessities in a bond. And I think for my family, it's making things. It's like the careful craft. It's process. It's like filling out your little space in your little area. You've seen my parents' house. It's like
it's
all
gorgeous.
my family's houses are just amazing. Like, so you walk in and it's just them. It's not that they're like the most beautiful houses in the world or the most like, you know, high, like, you know, lofty ceilings. But like my dad basically built our house, you know, over 20 years, and like it is a product of that. But it is taken
care of, and it is well curated.
And Luke built a replica of his studio that he'd had for many years of this old mill in his backyard.
One? Oh, no.
The mill shut down.
I see.
And like, or someone bought it, and instead of finding a new studio, he built an outbuilding in their yard that is like the same size as his studio, just like by itself, a little other building, and it is an exact replica of the studio.
Value added soul, SOUL.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
And
that's love.
Okay, this is the last thing I'll say about value added soul, because I think it brings it home.
Good.
And this is something that has been very special to me.
Don't worry about the time. Just talk.
My dad built the box for Luke's ashes. And what he built was in wood. And he just had the idea and just did it in like one day. It's really, really beautiful. It's this like wooden recreation of this turntable that Luke had built, because he was really into like machines and electronics and made all these amazing machines. And it's like perfectly smooth, like satin finish, and it's like a little LP player, you know, so it has like the little circle that the record would go on and the little needle, and my dad made it all out of wood, and it's perfectly articulated, like you can drop on the thing and you can turn the knobs, and he made like the little like plates that are on top of it, but he didn't write like what the actual record player on it. He called it the soul transcriptor. And it was just like, my dad really loves the hypnagogic state as well. And it's like, he's a very quiet person who I think has also very ready access to that like well of images, but doesn't always have he doesn't have the way of talking that I do, where it like comes quickly, but it comes when it arrives fully formed. Yes. You know? And he called it the soul transcriptor, and it is just this like beautiful, beautiful piece of craft that he made in like a day. And he and Oliver and Jesse, who are my cousin and my uncle, you know, they all stamped in silver his name on it. And it just feels like such a like, my dad just had the idea and he's like, that's what I'm making. Do whatever you want to do. Follow that's what I want to do. And like,
have the impulse, you know, trust it.
And it just, and like, the reason he did it was because like the way he was processing what he was feeling was with his hands, was with his craft. And like, that's how he is honoring. He like perfectly recreated this thing that Luke spent time building. And like, like it's like an answer, like a call and response almost. It's like just such a beautiful, beautiful object. And then we actually, I think this has been on the brain recently because we buried him a few weeks ago. You know, my dad didn't want to put the soul transcriptor like directly in the ground, and so he built again, and like had the idea in like a day. He built like a perfect box that he called the touring case, and he had his friend, who's like a stone cutter, design like a typeface that was just like exactly the Sony typeface. And his brother works at a marine like machining, but like they machine parts for boats. My uncle Jesse, and he and my uncle Jesse like cut it with like one of those like crazy 80,000 PSI like water cutters, and they cut the letters out together. And so it looks like, like this box that a turntable would come in is so beautiful.
It's so amazing the number of people that were like brought into this too, or like offered their gifts, or like what they're able to do.
Did. Everybody like Luke is somebody that just everybody at some point, like creatively, like was bolstered by him or got something. Like he's the one who gave me that typewriter that like totally changed everything for me.
Yeah.
That I've been selling my services. I did it for you in Tim's Holiday
that
Art
cool.
Market. I hauled that big fucking heavy typewriter to the BCC and like didn't have anything to sell, but had like agreed to do it, I guess. So I just sold like unlicensed therapy where I would like type up notes and give them to you at the end.
Right. Did anyone cry?
Yes.
Really?
2 different people.
Wow.
I made like
Did you know them?
$100.
You didn't know them?
Nope.
You could do that
Strangers.
in the park.
Oh, that feels so tacky.
Wait, but maybe you could do it in the park and you'd make lots of money and you could quit your job. Well, I think that thank you for sharing such your beautiful mind and
God.
all these beautiful tales of your family. And I think you're such a beautiful person.
You're a beautiful person. Thank you for asking me to do it. And thank you for... I wasn't very funny, but that's okay. Well, we did the fuck, marry, kill.
Yes, we had some.
Funny.
And that's the thing is that it's going to be funny just because like we are funny. And but it's not, is it really a comedy contest? Is it really a comedy podcast? Not really. It is comedy because there's going to be comedians on it.
Yeah.
So it's comedy adjacent. Does everything I have to do in my life need to be comedy just because I call myself a comedian?
No. Hey, back up.
We're tired of this. We're tired of all this branding.
Well, I think comedians crave to talk about things like this and feel embarrassed to do so.
I know.
So I think it's like, that was what was nice. Some comedians came to the Holiday Art Market. I had some like really cool conversations with comedians about comedy.
We're all feeling and thinking so much.
Good night.
Good night.